And be more effective in fighting for the ocean. And it's what it's about now, is fighting for survival. I mean, last year, the hottest year on record, following 2014 and 2015, we're in the third mass extinction event for coral bleaching around the world. 1/5 of the Great Barrier Reef died. So we're seeing these cascading disasters of industrial overfishing, of pollution, of loss of habitat, and fossil fuel-fired climate extinction basically driving us. And at the same time, we now have this other threat, which is a president and Congress that are in denial on all these things. Essentially, at the Science March, we've reached the point where even scientists have to go into the streets to defend fact. So because it's public domain, I saw a sign at the Science March that's now one of our logos. The oceans are rising, but so are we. Today, with an intensity of knowledge, we're going to move forward. Tomorrow we're going on to the Hill, Capitol Hill, to let our elected officials know that the oceans matter and that people who love the ocean vote, and that we're going to vote the ocean and vote the coast. And like Saul Alinsky said years ago, there's two poles of power in this town, money and votes, money and people. And we're going to, we've seen the resistance that's emerged right after the election with the Women's March, with thousands of people who went to airports across America to defend immigrants and refugees like my parents. We've had the Science March and the Climate March, although I was here 2 weeks ago. I was a little, put off that when we marched past the Trump Hotel, they didn't have a phalanx of riot police guarding it. I felt like we were sort of being dissed that way. But the next wave of action is going to be ocean action. And we're going to have the largest Hill Day in history in terms of a citizen lobby to protect the ocean, to stop offshore oil and restore funding to the agencies, our frontline agencies and allies. And then on May 20th, we're going to have Hands Across the Sand, and we're building the next wave, which is about people who care and love their ocean. Great, and we have ocean champions on the Hill. I see one of them is already here. So I'd like to, we talk about the seaweed, the marine grassroots organizing that's going on that we have to expand. So Cindy, if you want to come up. Cindy Zipf is head of Clean Ocean Action New Jersey, one of my original board members at Blue Frontier, and is here to introduce one of our ocean champions that we're going to be visiting with tomorrow, but he's come down here himself.
As David said, the seas are rising and so are we, and I am profoundly honored to be able to introduce a ocean champion from New Jersey. New Jersey hasn't always been synonymous with a clean and healthy ocean. We've had our bad days, our bad years, our bad decades. We were the ocean dumping capital of the world with 8 ocean dump sites where it was legal to dump sewage, sludge, acid waste, industrial waste, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we were fortunate that we had a galvanized people of all interests, from commercial fishing and recreational fishing, garden clubs, divers, boaters, swimmers, and surfers, of course, to rise up. And we had strong leadership as well in our Congress to stand up and make a change. And that's when I first met now Senator Bob Menendez as a congressman, as we took on a very significant challenge of what to do with 6 million tons of dredge material coming out of New York and New Jersey Harbor. And it wasn't a very easy problem to solve. It was very vexing. There were a lot of different competing interests, but at the end of the day, that dredge material that used to be dumped in the ocean is now being treated and managed in an environmentally sound way, and we have a deep harbor, and it's a green port and a great model. So that's the kind of example that Senator Menendez brings to these complex issues, and he has been absolutely steadfast in his effort to help fight offshore oil and gas drilling. At the time with Senator Menendez, they were the dynamic duo that stood up and committed to filibuster any kind of effort in the U.S. Senate that would lead to offshore drilling. He's fought for funding for our EPA, for Superfund, for the Beach Act, which makes sure our waters are safe for swimming from sewage. Again, he is fearless and he is tireless, and I am so proud and honored to introduce Senator Bob Menendez.
Let me thank Cindy Ziff for her indomitable spirit. She is a real champion for New Jersey's coast, along with all of those who follow her at Clean Ocean Action. Let me welcome you to Washington, and thank you for making your way to the 2017 Blue Vision Summit. And I really mean that. Whether you are a conservationist or a beachgoer, an oceanographer, an activist, a scientist, a student, I want to thank you for making your voice heard. You're here because you understand that our oceans are not just part of our national heritage, they are a vital link to life itself here on Earth. Our oceans serve as our planet's circulatory system. They regulate our climate, drive our weather, produce more than half of all oxygen on Earth. Our oceans nourish us with seafood serving as a primary protein source for over 2.6 billion people across the world. And they sustain us economically and culturally. They keep entire economies afloat, supporting industries like tourism, recreation, science, fishing, and the trade that flows to our harbors and seaports each and every year. In New Jersey, our front seat to the Atlantic Ocean is integral to our way of life. Our shores are home to generations of families, vacations, bustling small businesses, and vibrant coastal communities. And while I may be partial to the Jersey Shore, the reality is that nearly 40% of all Americans live along a coastline. So the future of our nation and our planet is therefore inextricably tied to the health of our oceans. That's why in recent years, we fought so hard to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, to promote more sustainable fishing practices, and to protect some of our most pristine waters from oil and gas industry exploration and exploitation. Unfortunately, not everyone shares these priorities. In just a few short months, the Trump administration has made its environmental doctrine crystal clear. Well, maybe not that clear, you can't quite see it. Dirty energy profits above clean air and water for our people. We saw it in their efforts to roll back President Obama's Clean Power Plan, with their efforts to conceal the impact of seismic testing on marine life, and most recently with the dangerous executive orders issued on April 30th. Executive orders that threaten to let big oil auction off our coastlines to the highest bidder. For the past several years, I've worked tirelessly with Cindy and many others, alongside many other people here, surf riders and Oceana and many others, to get a bill on drilling in the Atlantic included in the Obama administration's 5-year leasing plan. And finally, in late 2016, the Interior Department finalized its oil leasing policy for the next 5 years. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I never expected that a 5-year plan would be revisited 6 months later. Yet, here we are. The administration is moving to tear up that 5-year plan, which basically took the Atlantic off the table, and let big oil write up a new one that requires at least 2 offshore leases in the Atlantic each year. For oil companies, we know that offshore drilling comes down to a simple cost-benefit analysis. The initial costs of offshore drilling are paid by the American people, who see billions of their tax dollars funneled away from things like education and infrastructure into oil company coffers each year. So big oil gets to drill, and the American people get the bill. The industry also enjoys a cap of $134 million on their liability for the economic costs of any spill. And guess what? Huge portions of the penalties they pay are tax deductible as well. So for oil companies, low upfront costs and limits on liability are a recipe for huge profits. But for our shore communities, the risks are high and the rewards are low. And everyone who benefits from living, working, and vacationing along our coast stands to lose, as well as our ability to be good stewards for future generations of Americans. My home state of New Jersey is just one example. An oil spill would threaten our tourism industry and the 500,000 people that employ it. It would threaten all of our commercial and recreational fishermen's opportunities, and it would be a generational loss. And it would tank coastal property values worth over $700 billion in New Jersey alone. But the dirty energy giveaways don't stop with tearing up that 5-year plan. The White House has also announced its intention to allow drilling in waters that were granted permanent protection by President Obama, something that we advocated for. Now, there's just one problem with that. I hope you will notice my emphasis on the word permanent. The protections extended by the President were crafted by Congress to be respected by future administrations and shielded from special interests. So one thing President, from our view, made a permanent designation of taking off certain canyons in the Atlantic off the table. That was it. It was permanent. That's why efforts to ignore these protections are likely a violation of federal law, and why some of America's most stalwart defenders of our environment have already filed suit. But if giving big oil a green light to expand offshore drilling weren't enough, the administration is also working to roll back regulatory safeguards aimed at preventing catastrophic oil spills like we saw in the Deepwater Horizon tragedy. A tragedy that cost the lives of 11 workers and the livelihoods of thousands of coastal businesses and communities. So here's what I'm doing, everything in my power with a few of my colleagues, to prevent this administration from undoing our hard-won progress. Last week, I reintroduced the Coast Anti-Drilling Act to permanently ban all drilling and seismic testing in the Atlantic. A number of colleagues who co-sponsored it, and you can help us build momentum by asking your representatives to co-sponsor the Coastal Act, and by signing on as citizen co-sponsors at menendez.senate.gov today. I've also teamed up with my friend Senator Ed Markey to urge the Department of Interior to uphold their 5-year plan. And we're keeping up the pressure by introducing new legislation to stop dirty energy companies from writing our federal energy policies. We have to do more than just defeat the latest threats from big oil. We have to be relentless and proactive in the stewardship of our beaches and coastal waters. Take the appropriations process, for instance. Earlier this year, the White House released a reckless budget that defunded the Environmental Protection Agency and many other critical agencies that we care about. We had a big win last week in Congress when we passed a spending bill for the remainder of 2017. One that protects our investments in conservation, in science, and in coastal habitat restoration. I was thrilled that we secured nearly $10 million for beach grants, a program that has been on the chopping block of not just this administration, but also the last. Last year, 25 of my colleagues joined me in an effort to save this program, and we prevailed. And we did it because of advocates like all of you who made your voices heard. Now, that may sound like small victories, but they have a big impact on our wetlands, our estuaries, and wildlife habitats. And as negotiations over the 2018 budget pick up in the months ahead, I'll again be leading an effort to fund Beach Act grants and protect NOAA's coastal restoration programs. And once again, we'll be calling on all of you to speak up. Let me close by saying in times like these, I know that sometimes people can be discouraged. There's no question that big oil and other corporate interests enjoy a lot of influence in Washington. But let me be clear, you have a lot more influence in your hands than they do. You have a lot more influence in your hands than David. The question is, just as they have capital, will you use your capital and those of your friends and colleagues? There's a reason I spend so much time in the Senate defending our oceans, supporting scientific research and promoting a clean energy future. The people of New Jersey care about it, the nation needs it, and so does our planet. So don't let this administration give you any impression that it can run roughshod over our oceans and beaches without hearing from the people who live by them, who work by them, who want to leave them cleaner and healthier for future generations. We can't resign ourselves to playing defense in the Trump era. If we want healthy oceans, clean beaches, a safe climate, we have to be vigilant and steadfast stewards of our environment. And it all starts with you, advocates from every corner of our country and all walks of life, telling your elected officials where you stand and asking them, where do they stand? Where do they stand? And you'll probably get to see in your visits some staff people, and they're good people. But I'd say, can I see my senator for a few moments? And I'd make the point. Because I'll tell you, when people come to visit me, it makes a big difference. I've known they've taken time out of their life, out of their families, out of their work, because they care passionately about something. And when those people are from my home state of New Jersey, I listen. And I hope they will too tomorrow. I hope to see a big blue wave on Capitol Hill so we can change the course of events. Thank you very much.
I think we got the message right there. Right now we've got about 200 people signed up for the Hill tomorrow. Lauren Townsend, where are you? She stands up. She'll give us some briefings. Basically, right now we have 23 states that will be on the Hill tomorrow, and also in front of the Department of Interior on Thursday to let Ryan Zinke know that he works for us, not fossil fuel. 23 states, and not just New Jersey and California and Rhode Island and Hawaii, but we also have states here. We've got Colorado and Arizona and Ohio. The coastal state understand that we're facing these huge challenges. They not only want to open up our offshore waters to drilling, they want to take away the protections we already established, the hope spots, in Hawaii and the Atlantic. And of course, the person who first talked about creating hope spots for half the ocean is our friend and generally known as her Deepness, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who's with us because she's always where the ocean first, breaking wave is. And anyway, I'd like to invite Sylvia up to speak to us.
Thank you, David. A big shout out, please, for David and for Wendy Benchley. Thank you for bringing us together. When you talk about making waves, you're relentless and wondrous for doing what you've been doing. Oh, and Senator, are you still here? I'm a Jersey girl. It was on a New Jersey beach a few years ago where I was knocked over by a wave and the ocean got my attention. And has held my attention ever since. But it's life in the ocean that has really kept me going for these many years, more to come. What is it that sets this planet apart from all the others? It's the water, it's the ocean, it's the existence of a living planet. It's taken 4.5 billion years to get us to where we are. It's taking us a few decades to unravel the elements that are absolutely vital to keep us alive and well. Okay, so I had a little talk with David before this morning's event, and I have to say, David, you're kind of depressed about the state of the world. I mean, when you look at the numbers, read the headlines, or the fine print on page 15 or whatever it is about what's happening to the living world, there's plenty of reason for despair, especially since the election this year. But, come on, if I could be born anywhere in time, sings Jackson Browne, it would be now. It would be now. Why would he say such a thing? Why, when I speak, as I did just a few days ago, to a second grade class in Marin, and a fifth grade class in Marin, did I tell the kids that they're the luckiest people, luckiest kids ever to be born? Now is the time. Because, as never before, we're armed with knowledge. We're knowing what nobody who ever lived before the present time could know. Eat your heart out, Galileo. He was such a smart human being, and he was pressured by people who were not so intelligent around him. He presumed to declare, based on evidence, that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Oh my gosh, what a concept. It wasn't that long ago, geologically speaking, or even in the history of humankind, that we really, generally speaking, thought Earth was the center of everything. All those sparkly things up in the sky, all that revolved around us.
No.
Not too different from the attitude of some of the people who are here in Washington, D.C. today, calling the shots or trying to. But now we know that we are a part of something much larger than any of us individually or collectively. We are part of nature. And we have to respect nature, the natural systems that got us to where we are. Amazing when you think about it. All of those sparkly things in the sky, none of them inhabitable by the likes of us, as far as we can tell. And even if there is some little speck out there somewhere, it's not going to be an alternative to what we have to look at right here. Make peace with nature, make peace with the ocean. President Obama once remarked that our highest priority must be to keep the world safe for our children. Oh, he was thinking guns and things at the time. But those words, let's keep the world safe for our children. How do we do that? It isn't just what we do to one another. It isn't just this social crunch that we impose on one another that causes threats to our future. It's what we're doing to our life support system. And that's anchored in the ocean. No water, no life, no ocean, no us. Somehow, when kids start to learn their ABCs and their numbers, why isn't it just as important, maybe even more important, to know who they are, where they come from, where we might be going, about the nature of the world? Well, here's the thing. I can forgive those 500, 400, 300, even 100 years ago for not conveying to the next generation that we've really got to take care of the natural world because it takes care of us, makes our lives possible. I can forgive it because we did not really understand what now is known, that we are changing the nature of nature through the consumption of nature. Well, look, every living thing does what humans do, consume the world around them. We eat our neighbors, the fish, the birds. You know, we cut the trees to build our houses, to foster our prosperity. It's how every creature, whether you're an earthworm or an eagle, you use the natural world. But until about a couple of hundred years ago, well, actually, whenever humans really mastered technology to consume faster and more comprehensively the natural world like no other creature on the planet, things were moving along with changes, always. Nature of existence has changed, but at a kind of a stately pace, with a few big interruptions, like having a comet, an asteroid, strike the Earth. I mean, big deal. But now, what you are doing has comparable consequences to the planet, changing the nature of nature. So with all the other things that are going on, we must keep, like, front and center, the recognition. Our highest priority has to be to keep the world safe for our children, but for us as well. Now that we know we're able to do that, 500 years ago, even 50 years ago, we thought the ocean was too big to fail. No matter what we put into it, no matter what we take out of it, the ocean will continue to be what the ocean always has been, in our view, limitless. All right, so here we are, the Blue Vision Summit, Blue Frontier, the seaweed revolution, whatever you want to call it. It's a moment in time. And we are armed with knowledge. We've got the evidence of melting ice in polar areas. Who could imagine that 50 years ago? Well, a few smart scientists could see the potential for this happening, but we are living it. We don't have to imagine it. Who could imagine that we could strip the ocean of 90% of many of the big fish, like sharks and tunas and swordfish, cod, even the little fish, at risk because we're so good at finding, catching, and marketing them? With what consequences? Half the coral reefs. You heard about the state. If you don't have to hear it here, you can just read it anywhere about what's happening to the Great Barrier Reef. Protected first in the 1970s. At about the same time that this nation stepped up and declared the National Marine Sanctuary Act. Isn't it amazing? In the 70s. Not so amazing when you think about what provoked in the 1970s the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Management Act, the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. Many look at that view of Earth from space as a trigger, as a moment in time that shocked people with the awareness that this is it, this blue sphere in the midst of a universe of inhospitable alternatives. It really isn't an alternative. This is it. Well, now there's a second reason to be shocked into awareness, and that is to see how powerful we are at consuming the natural world. Half the mangroves around the world. We know now how important they are for capturing carbon, for providing a bulwark against storms along coastal areas, so that every mangrove tree has a magnified importance economically and otherwise for security reasons. But now we know the shock of awareness of our power to alter the nature of the world. But being so powerful, we also can take action. We can turn things around, and we've got the evidence of that too. Where we proactively embrace nature on the land and in the sea, wonderful things can happen. It's called restoration, recovery. We have examples all over the world, mostly since the 1970s. Although there's one shining little example down in the Caribbean where President Kennedy in 1961 used the power of his presidency under a little piece of U.S. legislation called the Antiquities Act, designated Buck Island as a national monument. It's tiny, but it's really important because it was later expanded a bit by another president, Clinton. But it's a little patch in the midst of a part of the ocean where on the order of 80% of the corals had disappeared in the last 50 years. And yet where the fish are protected, where the lobsters are protected, where it's like a little jewel that is serving as a source of restoration in the air. You can actually find grouper living in the little Buck Island Reserve. It's hard to find grouper almost anywhere in the Caribbean these days. We're so good at finding, catching, and consuming them. Look, what gives us cause for hope? It's knowing. It's knowing. And what gives cause for despair? It's ignorance. The biggest problem with the ocean, yes, what we're putting in, yes, what we're taking out, but the biggest problem has to be ignorance. It's not so obvious in this room, but step a few feet away. How do we get into the minds and hearts of people everywhere the same level of awareness, of hunger for knowing more and caring more that is evidenced here? I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. How do we take the evidence, the knowing, and make it sort of common to everyone? There are certain things that become a part of civilization that cause us to elevate from one generation to the next. We do not have to start from scratch every year to figure out numbers, to devise an alphabet, to develop a computer or a car or an airplane or whatever. We are armed with technology, we're armed with knowledge, we have plenty of reason for hope if we use what we've got. That's what I think this conference is really all about. It's bringing together people who know more about the critical issues that face humankind in terms of taking care of the underpinnings of what makes our, not just our prosperity, but our very existence possible. And how do we spread the word? How do we communicate to others who are not as well informed as those in this room, those who will eventually trickle into this conference over the next few days? How can we, each one of us, become an ambassador? Driven. How can we take more seriously? How do we create that sense of urgency? It's real. It's genuine. But how do we motivate others to be as motivated as this group? That's the key. Jackson Browne sings. My daughter works to help develop technologies to access the ocean. The kids that I encountered last year, who went to become part of a film called Sea of Hope, National Geographic produced. Bob Nixon actually inspired to do this journey around the coastline of the United States, taking kids out of Washington DC, some had never seen the ocean, never been on an airplane, let alone go in a submarine home. But they did. They have become motivated. I wish I had the answer. I'm here to maybe find some answers about how to overcome this lethargy of, we can still breathe, right? It's okay. Never mind that plankton in the ocean for the last 100 years has been declining and now at an accelerating rate. I mean, phytoplankton, the whole engine that generates oxygen, takes up carbon, feeds the ocean systems, and basically helps maintain the planet in a way that is favorable to us. Knowing is the answer, but it isn't good enough just for a handful of us to know. It wasn't good enough for just Galileo to know that Earth is not the center of the universe. It had to become common knowledge, so that with every decision we make, it's in that context, that framework of knowing that the choice you make about what to eat, what to wear, how you power your lives, what you teach your kids, that everything is within this framework of understanding that we must respect the natural world. We have to take care of the ocean. We have to look at the laws, even the laws that make it okay, legal, to extract large quantities of wildlife. Question them. Question them. It's not just the illegal extraction of wildlife, it's also the legal extraction, the rules and regulations that make it okay to take too much out of the ocean. And do what kids do best. Ask questions. Look for evidence. Become a scientist. Do what a scientist does. It doesn't matter what else you do. Observe carefully. Report honestly what you see. That's what scientists do. Everyone can do it. Everyone should do it. Look for the evidence. And be ready to act whenever an opportunity arises. So, tomorrow, it's an opportunity. Use your voice. Be not just brave. It's not a matter of brave. I mean, consider the alternatives to not doing something now. If we don't take action within the next 10 days, 10 months, 10 years, whatever the time frame, it just gets harder. Our decisions will shape everything that follows. And it's just evidence. Look at how we have come to be where we are. As my fellow explorer in residence at the National Geographic, Zahi Hawass, the director of the pyramids, says, if you do not know your past, you cannot know your future. Well, look at the past. How did we arrive where we are? Okay, it's our turn now. How do we take it from where we are to get to a better place? Well, informing the kids is a good place to start, but it starts even before that. How to inform ourselves. Look for those opportunities, those moments when we can insert knowledge, insert our power to turn things in a very positive way. Elections, okay, there's a good example. But there's a conference coming up in June where the United Nations is coming to New York. And for the first time, really focusing on the ocean for about a week. A week. Oh well, it's a start. And then the summer, July, again, the United Nations is having a conference to consider the high seas, half the world. 64% of the ocean, but half of the world. What do we have to do? What are our targets? For the blue vision, thinking about 2020 and 2020 vision, the United Nations is suggesting 10% of the ocean should be protected by 2020. Where are we now? Less than 5% of the ocean protected in ways that even the fish are safe, or the lobsters, or the shrimp, or whatever. So, use your power. You heard it from the senator, you heard it from David, you'll hear it from me. I think all of you need to say that to yourself, look in the mirror, but say it to others as well. Use your power. We have a chance, as never before, to go from where we are to a much better, bluer place than we are now. By protecting the ocean, it really means protecting everything we care about. Now is the time. Maybe as never again. Thank you.
And that's why she's for deepness. And it's good to remember. She points out, you know, in Galileo's days, it was the solar system deniers who had the political power. And today, you know, a coastal real estate developer and TV celebrity denies the reality of climate and the impact of the oceans. But we're the people here who get so much from it in terms of, you know, recreation, transportation, protein, energy, just that sense of awe and wonder. We're giving it back, and we're here to strategize for the next few days how we deal with the threat of offshore oil, how we deal with the threat of plastic and other forms of pollution in the ocean so that plastic doesn't end up weighing more than all the amazing living marine life that's still out there. And the great thing, and to talk about coastal resiliency and millions of people at risk from rising seas and bad policies. And we have all the solutions. You know, if you stop killing fish, they tend to grow back. You know, the challenge is one of political will, so that's what we're doing the next few days. And what's great is that, you know, Sylvia, when I did 50 Ways to Save the Ocean, Sylvia said, good for, you know, from K through grade. And to a certain degree, our movements, you know, it's lack the youth and diversity, but I think times of crisis change that reality. And I know that in terms of participation here, well, it's just, you know, it's amazing how many young people are engaged. Plus, we've got some guests. Could the folks from the Central Park East 2 middle school stand up? Are they here? Okay. Olivia's here, Carter's not, Reese. They're this year's Peter Benchley Youth Award winners, and maybe the students who, the delegation from the University of South Florida in Tampa. We've got Sean, who's organized another of our past youth winners, who's organizing the youth panel. We'll have at 3 o'clock. And I'd like to introduce also last year's youth winner, Daniela Fernandez, who organized the Sustainable Oceans Alliance that has started Georgetown, has now gone global. You can make a revolution. The reality is that, you know, our youth are not the leaders of the future. They're our partners. They're our leaders today. And if we partner together, we're going to take the streets and take the halls of Congress and still able to turn the tide. We've got huge challenges. That means a huge moment. And it's also nice to remember that 80% of millennials who voted this past election did not vote for the guy in power. So, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I am honored to be here today, and especially after hearing Dr. Sylvia Earle. You know, you have seen the growth of the Sustainable Oceans Alliance from the very beginning, so thank you for being here. Thank you for inspiring all of us. I would like to start today by asking everyone in this room to take a second to imagine, what would your life be like if you were famous? Take a few seconds, and don't look so surprised that you've all thought about it before. Really think about it. How would your life be different? So now that you have a little bit of time to think about it,
let's deconstruct this idea of fame. What does it mean to be famous? First of all, you're very popular. You have adoring fans. Second of all, you have money, right? You have a wealth of resources at your disposal. And third of all, and most importantly, millions of people like you. They care about you. And they'll go out of their way to help you if you're in trouble. And that is the power of fame. It is that untapped potential of fame that led my organization, the Sustainable Oceans Alliance, to launch a campaign to make the ocean famous. And that goes exactly to the point Sylvia Earle was talking about earlier today. How can we make the ocean a mainstream concern? And today I'm here to tell you the 3 strategies that the next generation, the millennials, are hoping to employ to make the ocean famous. And again, please, a huge round of applause for all the young people that are in this room. It's amazing. So first, we have to champion the idea of including youth in high-level conversations. It is imperative that we don't keep them out of these conversations, that we include them throughout every step of the way. If we are to resist and defend our ocean, we have to amplify their voices and give them the ability to speak out, to share their ideas with the entire world. My own experience, my story really begins by attending a meeting at the UN back during my freshman year of college at Georgetown University. And of course, to many of you here who have been to UN meetings, it's not a big deal, right? But let me put it into context for you. I was a city girl from Chicago, so the closest body of water to me was Lake Michigan, and I did not recommend going snorkeling or scuba diving in there. And I was a first-generation freshman at Georgetown, very passionate about climate change, but I didn't really know what role the ocean played in the overarching ecosystem. So here I am on a train on my way to New York, to the UN headquarters, and I'm not sure what to expect. You know, I had never been around foreign dignitaries or heads of state. I'm not sure really what my role would be in the process. So I walk into the UN, and I'm thinking I'll be in the back of the room just listening and paying attention and taking out all the information, just like a lot of people here are. And I get there and I'm ushered into one of the round tables with these foreign dignitaries, and I'm paralyzed. In my mind, I'm like, what am I doing here? What did I get myself into? So I'm sitting next to the ambassador of Spain and the prime minister of Italy, and they're asking me, oh, so what country are you from? From Georgetown University. And it was that time where, of course, the good old rule of thumb is fake it until you make it. I acted cool, collected, although I was freaking out in the back of my mind. And it was at that meeting, I just pretended like it was any other typical meeting at the UN, but in reality, it wasn't a typical day for me. In reality, that day changed my life. It was the day that I found out that the ocean was dying. It was the day that I became afraid of the future that our generation is inheriting. And that fear that I still feel today is what motivated me to start the Sustainable Oceans Alliance. 4 years fast forward now, the Sustainable Oceans Alliance has hosted 3 global summits, bringing together ocean luminaries like Dr. Sylvia Earle, Dr. Greg Stone, and Rick Sala. And an incredible amount of millennials have come to our summits from all over the US. We had 1 chapter at Georgetown University, and now we have 30 chapters across the US, with the goal of expanding to 200 by 2018 globally. Really building on this idea of how can we get students, how can we empower them, and make them leaders for our ocean. Building on this idea of inclusion, this June, we will bring a delegation of students to the UN conference that we just spoke about. In October, we will co-host the youth engagement aspect of the Malta conference with the European Union. Again, bringing 100 young people to the European Union in Malta to be part of these conversations. And that is the dream, right? The dream is to allow more students to have the same experience that I had, to give them the opportunity to have a seat at the table, to make their voices heard, and to learn, and to believe that they can make it, to believe in themselves, and to know that they have every right to be in that room and in that conversation. And that's where you all come in. All of you with your organizations, your businesses, your communities, you have the power to include young people. Whether it is making sure that you create board positions for young people, invite them to meetings, invite them to conferences, both as attendees and speakers. It is critical that we include these young voices. So, now the second strategy. Second strategy is to encourage the growth of ocean startups. So the millennial generation has been called the true entrepreneurial generation. And that is because research shows that 20 to 35-year-olds have created more businesses, are managing bigger staff, and are targeting higher profits than previous generations. So why are millennials turning to entrepreneurship? There are many reasons, and independence is one of them, but the three main ones are, it's easier than ever to create a company now. Second of all, millennials inherently believe that by creating a company, you can change the world. And third of all, millennials also believe that they can fail forward. They're not as afraid of the uncertainty that comes with, having a steady paycheck, and they're willing to take that risk if it means sacrificing for a bigger cause. In our experience hosting these conferences at Georgetown, we have come to learn that millennials have a lot of ideas of how to create these new ocean companies. Just to give you a few examples, we had a millennial talk about reinventing the way that we evaluate cuisine and using sustainability standards to measure fisheries. We had a millennial talk about how can we create new biodegradable products to replace plastic. So all of these are incredible ideas that are coming up from these amazing minds. We just have to really nurture them. So then again, the question becomes, how can we as an ocean community really help facilitate this entrepreneurial spirit? And the solution is simple. First of all, we have to incentivize the creation of competitions. Let's create competitions that target specific ocean problems and encourage young people to find solutions to them. Then we can also create amazing accelerators and incubators to mentor these young entrepreneurs and give them the skills that they need to build out their ideas. Then we also need to create seed funding. How can we have an entrepreneur without no money? And we have a lot of money in the ocean community. We just have to make sure that we bring it to the right direction. And also, we have to celebrate these companies. Celebrate the fact that they are going into their mission with the idea of not only creating a profit, but also changing the world as they do it. So now, the third strategy is, we have to transform momentum into tangible action. We can build the largest movement the world has ever seen, but if we don't have tangible goals and actions, it will amount to nothing. Take, for example, the Women's March, the Science March, Climate March. They raised a lot of attention and awareness, but what change did they make? They made no dent in policy, they made no difference in business, and they didn't change civil society's behavior. So let's think about that for a minute. How can we, as the ocean community, make a difference in changing all these different aspects? In order to influence policy, we have to come together and figure out which policy action, which coherent policy steps are we going to take, and encourage our constituents to pursue those policy actions. That is why the Sustainable Oceans Alliance has all these chapters that will make sure to target their local elected officials. By creating these young constituents ready to be activated at a moment's notice, literally by sending a tweet or by sending a Facebook message, we'll send them out of the officials' offices, and they'll be there ready to lobby them. So then, how can we figure out a way to incorporate this idea of changing public's behavior? A great example is the Lonely Whale Foundation. They recently launched a campaign to make a straw, to free the ocean from straws. It's called Stop Sucking. And it's quite literally and figuratively, stop sucking. So they have incentivized young people to stop using straws. How many of you have heard of the campaign, by the way? Raise your hand. Great. You see, it's making waves, and it's making people realize that you don't need that straw. And it's also incentivizing people to go petition their local businesses to stop purchasing straws. These are the actions that we need to focus on. What can you do? Tomorrow, when you go out on your family vacation and you go to a restaurant, talk to the manager and ask them, can you please stop using straws or I will stop coming to eat at your restaurant? It's that simple. So then, how can we really make the ocean famous? We have to celebrate it. And to that end, the Sustainable Oceans Alliance has partnered with the World Ocean Festival. focusing on creating a very large celebration the day before the UN conference, making sure to amplify the voice of support of all constituents for the ocean. But again, focusing on how can we get civil society to give pledges, give personal pledges on what they're going to do to make a difference. And if we can do that, if we can target this momentum that we're building here at this conference and at future conferences, I can assure you, Dr. Sylvia Earle, that we can make a difference and that we can make the ocean famous. And so, even though I still feel fear about what will happen to our ocean, I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that every single person in this room will include youth in these conversations. I am hopeful that we will all build on this momentum and transform it into tangible action. And I am hopeful that together we can really save our ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. And by the way, heirs to the ocean here, can you guys stand up? Same with the ocean. I forgot to thank it for half the oxygen we consume. You know, and as I say, this is the moment. Unfortunately, a hotter, warmer, more acidic ocean contains less dissolved oxygen, and we just got a report that says we're seeing a decline of DO in the world ocean. So, no question, it's a moment of crisis, and we have the capacity to resolve it. Keep emphasizing it's not a question of solutions. Thursday we're going to have our 10th annual Peter Benchley Ocean Awards. We started with the first Blue Vision Summit. Peter Benchley was a keynoter, and after he passed over the bar, I realized everybody in the country pretty much knows he wrote Jaws. Nobody realized that he spent his life dedicated to protecting sharks and marine wildlife and their habitat. And so now there's a world honors that links his name to the solutions and building the solutions at the scale that is greater than the problems. So this is our challenge, how we scale up the solutions faster than the problems, including the problems we face in this town, concrete covered swamp that has not been drained. So